9 really riveting presentations, and with these last session, we've condensed a lot of information, excuse me, and a lot of great work looking at testing in specific key populations. So thank you to all of the presenters. We have quite a few questions coming in, so I'm going to start with some of them. So maybe starting, there is a question for Chido. So Chido, I hope that you're connected. Yes, I can see you. Thank you. So one of the questions was whether you were looking at the costs of the different strategies, as facility-based versus community or home-based, and whether that cost effectiveness of the different strategies was taken into account.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. So for the study, we have done a separate cost evaluation, and a manuscript is currently in draft, and I hope we'll be submitting it in the next few months. But what we did find is that cost was heavily associated with uptake. So the more people that we had taking up each option for testing, the cheaper the cost was. And so what we found was caregiver provided testing had the highest associated cost within our study. And what we also found is that the cost of index-linked testing was not that much different to the standard of care provided at each facility.
Thank you very much, Chido, for that explanation. I'm going to try and go quite quickly because we do have quite a few questions. So there were a couple of ones for Maxime. So Maxime, you were presenting the work in Côte d'Ivoire, and there are a couple of questions regarding around the preferences and the acceptability, and also a question more broadly around the fact that obviously some of your studies are done in one of the countries in Africa where there is sometimes more difficulty in integration for men who have sex with men, and what were the barriers that you met in your study? Over to you, Maxime. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me? No?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, great. So about the preference, we assess it by 4 questions. So we just basically asked to MSM if when they attended a community-based an MSM community-based testing settings, if they were well received, if they felt confident, if confidentiality was respected during the consultation, and if they would return to one of these sites. So it was how the satisfaction with the services was assessed. And regarding the context of homosexuality in Côte d'Ivoire, well, there is no law against homosexuality, but still it is highly stigmatized within the society. So it's indeed very difficult to investigate this population, but using a phone-based survey as we did, we were really surprised and able to reach this population. And what was really exciting about using the phone is that we were able to also reach different kind of MSN, especially those who were living in rural area or who were farthest away from the MSN community. So yeah, that's my answer.
Thank you, Maxime. There are a couple of questions for Radhika around your study with the traditional healers. One question is so one of the audience is interested in the commonest reason for the clients that visited traditional healers. Related question, which is around the options of integrating a Western biomedical intervention with traditional healers, and does that to give more credibility to some of the non-evidence-based approaches of traditional healers? Thank you, Radhika.
Thank you for those questions. With regard to the
Radhika,
first
over to you.
Issue about the complaints or the symptoms that were being treated by the healers, we did not collect that for the purposes of this trial. I'm sorry, you can't hear me? Can anybody hear me?
We can hear you, Radhika. Please go ahead. Yes, we can. Go ahead. Yes. There might be. Yes.
No. Oh,
I think, Radhika, you might have trouble.
Okay. With regard to the first question, the chief complaints,
okay.
We did not collect that for the trial. Oh, I can hear you all. I can hear you all just fine. I don't know if there's a delay or something like that with the video. Apologies. I'll just try to answer the questions and then we'll see how it goes. We enrolled 4 different types of traditional healers, which represent the spectrum of care in the area. So the complaints often ranged from wanting spiritual healing, involving herbal treatments, people seeking birth attendance, so people with getting prenatal care in the community, and bone setters who actually have musculoskeletal complaints. So we enrolled at all 4 of those healers. So we had people coming in for all of those different forms of complaints. They were not all HIV, not screened specifically for symptoms of HIV to be eligible for the trial. And finally, the second about introducing validated data-driven biomedical approaches. One thing that we did a lot of, which I did not have time to present here, was involve, we had a lot of qualitative research that helped us develop our intervention. And this is a paper that we hope to be published soon, but one of the chief was to really formulate a good collaborative relationship between healers and biomedical, the HIV clinic. So we had trainings, and actually the patients who received tests were very reassured by the presence of these certificates that showed that they had actually gone through training at the HIV clinic and had been collaborating with HIV clinicians. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Radhika. Todd, there's a question for you regarding your observations and your studies on fistula, and the participant is asking whether the skills and techniques could have contributed.
Yeah, no, that's a great question.
Todd, over to you.
Certainly could have contributed. The providers that do VMMC undergo.
Okay, I think we might have some
kind of a standardized
difficulty
training
in reaching Todd. I hope that everybody else can hear me.
We can hear you, and we can also hear Todd.
So, but it appears Okay, I'll just continue. So from the cases, the medical records from the cases that we looked at, it appeared that providers who performed circumcisions that were resulted in a fistula kind of span the spectrum of experience, both in years that they were doing VMMCs and in number of VMMCs performed. So it didn't appear, at least just from the cases, directly related to their, at least their experience. But from the we had, there was just no way to tell what each individual provider's surgical practices were. And so it could be that they were, there were variations there that just are not accounted for in these data. And so I think in a client with, a small penis, you have to be very careful with how deep you're putting a suture, applying electrocautery. There's probably a lot of other variables in place that we just didn't have access to in these data. The only thing that we had between clients that had fistulas and those that did not really was the age. So that's the only thing we could draw any kind of statistical conclusions with. Because in cases that did not have fistulas, in what would have been a control, the records were just very sparse, and they just would not contain information about experience or training of the provider that did it. So I think it's very likely that differences in provider technique contributed in some way to this, but I think there's so many variables there that just were not available in our data to really address that question definitively. Thank you. Over.
Thank you very much, Todd. I hope people hear me correctly. I'm getting a message that I have a problem. So to the end of the session, that people can hear me correctly. So I can see people nodding, so I assume that people. I really wanted to thank every really great presentations we heard on testing in different populations and in different. They were all really fantastic presentations. Thank you also to my co-chair, Sam Piri, to everybody, and has been helping me monitor the questions. We will now take a break, but please do join back as we will have a symposium in Africa, challenges and opportunities. So thank you very much, everybody.